Welcome to the Disabled Lifestyle Podcast by James and Jessica Pruitt. Life doesn't end just because your child is disabled. Here's your host, James and Jessica from DisabledLifestyle.com. Welcome to the Embracing a Disabled Lifestyle Podcast. This is your host, James Pruitt, and this is EDL Podcast Episode 1. Welcome, my name is James Pruitt, and this is my wife, Jessica. Why don't you introduce yourself, Jessica?
Hi, I'm Jessica Pruitt, and I'm 42 years old. Right now, I live in Lockhart, but I'm originally from West Texas, a little town called San Angelo. I was born and raised there, and I came from an alcoholic family. So, did experience a little bit of prejudice growing up, but I'm glad that we don't live in those times as much, knowing with what's going on in this world today. But graduated from high school. Yay! And am the wife of James Pruitt.
Yep. And I am James Pruitt. I've been working online since 2008, building websites and blogs. I'll talk about it a little bit later on. But Jessica and I actually both grew up in San Angelo. We went to John Glenn Junior High School in San Angelo. That's where we met. I moved away at the end of 9th grade. And then after several years, we got back together. That was many, many years later. Many. We were in then. She had Hunter at that point.
Yes. In between there, before I met James, I was into another relationship, and he was my high school sweetheart. And we both had a son together. His name is Hunter, and he's 16 years old. And it is some of this stuff has impacted his life as well. So you may hear certain things about him throughout this podcast.
Yep. And then in we started getting together right around 2011, 2012. I moved back, and I moved here from Florida. I was living in Florida at the time, and I moved back, and then we were dating, we got engaged, and then we found out we were pregnant with Emily. And we also dating, we got engaged, and then we found out we were pregnant with Emily. And we also found out that not only were we pregnant with Emily, but that Emily was going to have some challenges as she grew up. We found out that Emily was going to be born with a rare brain malformation called semilobar holoprosencephaly. Now, for those of you that have never heard of holoprosencephaly, which is, heck, most of the doctors we talk to have never even heard of it.
Or nurses.
It's a rare brain malformation. They don't call it a deformity, they call it a malformation, which is basically where the brain does not form the division between the left and the right hemispheres. And there are a lot of different levels of this brain malformation. She has one of the almost most cases. She has what they call semilobar holoprosencephaly. Basically, the different levels are on how much of that division does or does not exist. The alobar is the worst form, which does not have any division at all. She has semilobar, so partial division was formed, but about 3/4 of her brain did not form that division between the left and the right hemispheres.
Although at first they did think that Emily had alobar instead of semi.
That's true. At first, the initial impact, they thought she had the alobar version, but part of that was because we found out later that sonogram technology is not clear enough imaging to distinguish the difference between alobar and semilobar.
And we'll get into that later.
We had to wait till after she was born to really find out how severe it was going to be. So tell me just a little bit about how you felt when we first found out?
How I felt when I found out at the time, I guess a lot of you moms, maybe even some of your dads will understand this, but first was the kind of like death, denial. I was in denial about what the doctor said. Even though I heard what he said, I was in denial. Shock and devastation. I felt devastated. And those are basically, and a little bit of anger. Actually, probably all stages of what you go through a death. Kind of like having a death sentence on you. It's kind of how I felt.
I think you're just saying you felt like you went through those stages of grief.
Yes.
Just through finding out. And I think that's kind of one of the things a lot of us go through, is we kind of go through these stages. We have to grieve the loss of the idea that our child will be normal. Just like you have to grieve the loss of a loved one, or you have to grieve the loss of... Sometimes you have to grieve the loss of an idea that you have believed in or that you have lived with for your whole life. So when we found out Emily was going to be disabled, I was shocked too. We dealt with it differently, which we're going to go into deeper in a later episode. Here in just a couple of weeks, we're going to actually share the story of what it was, what we went through when we found out Emily was going to be disabled. But it was an emotional shock. It was draining. I was scared. I was overwhelmed. My brain was racing at 100 miles an hour. I think yours was too.
Yes, actually it was.
Yeah, we had all these ideas, all these questions. And then, so for me, I started looking online for some of these answers. You started calling people, talking to people on the phone, calling your family, telling everybody about it.
Well, actually, no, I didn't call everybody and tell them all about it. In fact, there were several. The only one I did tell were my sister and my mom. They wanted to tell the rest of the family, but at that time, that is not something I wanted. And I guess moms, you'll know what I'm talking about. But at that time, I didn't want to hear, "Oh, I'm so sorry." I didn't want to hear that. That's just something we did not want to hear. Like, she was already dead. And I'm sorry to hear that. I just didn't want the sympathy like that. I wanted the support, but I didn't want the sympathy of like she was dead and it was a condemnation of what was to come. I only wanted positive things in my life at that time. I didn't want to hear any negativity whatsoever. And so I chose not to tell a lot of my family members at that time.
Yep. So, just a little bit more about me. I've been working on the internet since 2008 and 2009. Started my first company online. And so when everything happened and when we first found out about Emily, I went online, started searching for answers. Well, we found a lot of information about holoprosencephaly, we found a lot of information about holoprosencephaly, which was not necessarily a good thing. But I was also looking at other information, like, okay, how are we going to pay her medical expenses? How are we going to pay our bills? How are we going to do all this life stuff? Because Emily's going to be disabled, but we still got the rest of our life to deal with too. We gotta work. How am I gonna work? How are we gonna do all this stuff? And that's kind of where I came at this idea that I was trying to find information on how to balance your life with taking care of your disabled child, and I wasn't finding it. I found a lot of great blogs, still follow a bunch of them today, on living with a disabled child, but they seem to focus on the child and how to handle other people when they meet your child, and bullying and all that kind of stuff. But it's all like everybody else in the family disappears and all that's left is this one child that's disabled. And that's just not the case.
You're right. It is not the case. We still have other people that we have to spend our time with, and other siblings that we have to spend our time with. So we decided that as parents of a disabled child, that we also needed to work on the fact that we also go through trials and errors, and we wanted to have something out there that not just for a disabled child, but for the parents as well, because we really felt that there's a need out there for parents that are getting shocking news. Some of them learn after the fact. Some of them are like us. Y'all don't know where to turn to at that time. We may have heard something here and there, but at the time, sometimes that's not kind of what we're having to deal with. So we're going to be discussing a lot of that kind of stuff in this, and I really am so excited because I feel hopefully if we can get everything out there that maybe it might be able to help somebody else be able to cope with dealing with having a disabled child.
Yep. And, I think that that's kind of the core of what we're doing. We kind of came up with this idea. I had already been thinking about it a little bit, about doing something, but I didn't have any clarity. I didn't have any idea. Then in 2016, we went to a conference for families of kids with disabilities, and specifically holoprosencephaly. We went to a conference for families of kids with disabilities, and specifically holoprosencephaly. And through that conference, I met a lot of families, had a lot of conversations, specifically about, the rest of life outside of the disabled kids. And there was a lot of questions that people had about it, but nobody seemed to have the answers. And nobody seemed to, know how do you deal with all this stuff, and nobody was addressing those issues. Everybody was talking still about, the kids and the kids' disabilities and, how to do that. The most of the conference, there was a few things in the conference that were about things outside of the child and their specific disabilities, but for the most part, most of it was about the child and their disabilities. And then as I was talking to some of the other dads, and specifically my friend Dan, who's one of the founders of Families.
Poor Dan.
Oh, I love Dan.
I know, but poor Dan. He thought that he was the troublemaker in the whole thing during the whole time of the conference.
Guys. Oh, Dan's always a good troublemaker. But through some of the conversations we had before or during the conference, as well as some conversations we had after the conference, because he and I have stayed in touch a little bit. I had talked to him about this idea that I had for doing a blog, doing a podcast, and talking to families of disabled kids, and talking about, how do you balance the rest of your life. And, he basically told me I was an idiot if I didn't do it. That was in 2016, and here we are now, near the end of 2017, and I'm finally, pulling the trigger and getting things rolling here. So then as I was discussing with Jessica, you said that you wouldn't mind co-hosting it with me.
Yes, I did say that because I totally agreed with James's idea. I do think that there's a real need out here for us parents, and to be able to have a very good support group in that. And one of the things I want to tell you is no matter what your child has, whether it's autism, CP, holoprosencephaly, my suggestion is go to these conferences. I can tell you, I came out, and me and James both came out, different people coming from this conference. And sometimes you just need to remember that, because life does go on day to day, but take what you learned and utilize it. Don't just put it up on the shelf and forget, hey, and talk to these people that you made wonderful connections with. I still keep up a little bit with it. My schedule is a little bit more hectic than James's schedule on that end, except for the fact that he does work a lot of hours. My schedule is busy with Emily, which, like, as he said, everything revolves around her or your disabled child. So that's why I wanted to co-host with him, because I felt that they needed to have two different views.
Yep. And see, I am not, we're not medical professionals, but we were thrown into this role of almost being expected to have a medical professional's knowledge and understanding of things. Jessica, even more than I am, because you're the one that balances the schedule. You're the one that makes sure one doctor knows what another doctor said and is doing. And that takes a lot of skill that we weren't born with and we didn't have and nobody taught us. We just had to figure it out as we went.
Well, thank you, because I never considered it that way, but thank you for sharing that with me.
So, but, my concept and kind of the core concept that we've talked about is there's really 5 key areas in our lives that we've been talking about that we want to share with the disabled lifestyle. And it's understanding that you are important too, and the rest of your family is important too. And yes, your child is probably going to take up the majority of your time, but you still need to find time for yourself. That means taking care of yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, taking care of you. Your health is important. That means taking care of yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, taking care of you. Your health is important. And the way I put it to a lot of people is, when I see parents that are saying that they don't ever have time for themselves and they don't ever take time for themselves, I always ask the same question, which is, if you're not here tomorrow to take care of your child because you didn't take care of yourself today, who's going to take care of your child tomorrow? You've got to take care of you so that you can be there for your child. If you don't take care of you, you can't take care of anybody else, no matter who they are or what their problem is. That's just something I learned a long time ago. Something Jessica is learning more of.
Yes, he's constantly harping on me on my health.
It's not just harping on you, it's because you are, we'll talk more about this probably throughout the show, but you are diabetic. If you don't, you won't be around to take care of Emily.
And that is true. I cannot tell you that enough and stress enough that the same things that are worrying him have actually crossed my mind too. And I have thought, if I wasn't here, who's going to take care of Emily? And that's the number one thought that all of us as parents need to, not just Emily, but your other children too. We need to keep in mind, if we're not here, who are they going to go to? Do you have something in place for if something was to happen? As of right now, we think we do, but that you never know. Things change. And to be honest with you, some people just don't understand. Family members don't understand really you as what parents are going through, unless they're like really involved, and you really need some kind of a support system for that going on. And maybe try to get your brother, your sister, your aunt, uncle, grandmother, grandfathers to go to some of these conferences too. Let it open up exactly, have them see exactly what is going on. They're not going to get to see the day-to-day stuff that we get to see, but they'll get a clue of, whoa, I never thought past this, or I never thought past that, because that's kind of what happened to me at this conference. I never thought past of the fact that she's disabled. I didn't think that I didn't think I'd have to worry about long-term type stuff. Part of it's because of her prognosis, but the other part is that I just didn't think about it. And this is stuff that they touch base on. And then it's like, whoa, that's going to come around the corner really fast. So yeah. I suggest everybody hit some of these conferences. I think you're going to come out with some good information, And is some of these conferences, I think you're going to come out with some good information. And I think that you'll have some really great relationships. Sometimes the people that you meet at these conferences, the best way I can describe it, are more of a family than your real family. And take that into consideration. Your family is important to you. I know mine is, but I felt closer to them than I did my own family. And I love my family. So basically, that was the most shocking of all, was feeling they just took us right in and they loved us and they understood us. And
right. I think it's that understanding, because your family, as much as they care and they want to help, they're not there on the day-to-day basis. They really don't know what you're dealing with day-to-day.
Correct.
And a lot of these families, you get out there and start networking with other families, and you're going to find that they know what's going on because they've been there too. To do this, I wanted to do this too, not just as a way to talk to people, but to build that community of people around us, and to help other families learn how to deal with some of these struggles. My idea with the Disabled Lifestyle is not just me and Jessica to sit here and talk to everybody every week, but we want to interview some other families, talk to other families that have been through some of these, have some conversations with them. Also, maybe talk to some people that are professionals at different things that we deal with on a regular basis, and how they can recommend suggestions on how we can overcome some of these struggles and deal with some of these struggles. One of the big areas that you're going to struggle a lot, I see a lot, is disabled families and families of disabled kids have one of the, are still married and you have a disabled child. I applaud you, because it is extremely difficult. We have been on the brink of divorce many, many times ourselves. And some days I'm surprised we're still together after all this time.
That's true,
and
guys.
we're only 4 years into this. So we're going to be talking about, what we're going through in our marriage, sometimes painfully, and what we're doing to overcome some of those struggles while still giving Emily the care she needs, still taking care of our other son. And then outside of that, one of the biggest areas that we struggle with it. Every family I have talked to struggles with it. One of my best friends, which is Dan again, recently told me some things about theirs. And their disabled child actually passed away several years ago. And they're still in financial hardships because of everything with him. And it's the finances. Our finances are unlike anybody else's. And because of that, either you're extremely limited in how much money you can get so that you can be qualified for all these government programs that'll help you pay for your medical bills, or you make too much money for that and you are in so much debt, which is one of the worst things that you can be in this world, is living on credit and debt. So we want to help people figure out some financial strategies so that they can improve their livelihood and still give their child the care that they need, and still really not ruin themselves financially trying to raise a disabled child.
That's right, James, because a disability, it doesn't matter whether you are financially stable or not. You get a disabled child and they're still going to be disabled whether they know that you can handle everything financially or not. And we both believe that that's one thing that needs to be covered and discussed, because like James has said, everybody's financial situations are different. And there's different levels of financial, going all the way down to poverty. So we're hoping that this might be able to help some of y'all out there and relieve some of the stress that y'all might be feeling.
Yep. So that's kind of what we're doing here with the Disabled Lifestyle. I think we're going to wrap up this first episode. I just wanted to introduce ourselves, talk a little bit about what we're doing as a disabled lifestyle. You can check us out around the web. Make sure you go to facebook.com, check in at disabledlifestyle.com, or at disabledlifestyle, if you're on Facebook already. Or you can also go to edlpodcast.com/001. You'll find the show notes for this first episode, and I'll have a link to our Facebook page in there. You can also find it all over my website, which is disabledlifestyle.com, where you can learn strategies and learn some of our experiences in raising a disabled child, see some stories, and see how we are helping families to get out there and raise a disabled child without sacrificing the rest of their lives. You got anything else?
At this moment, no, I could just think, wow, life sure does tend to interrupt everybody while they're recording, it seems like.
Yeah,
I just
we
want
have
to
a horn going off in the background there.
I just want to tell y'all, thank you for listening, and I hope that what we are bringing to the table really helps a lot of y'all out there. So really get the answers that you might need, or hopefully that y'all don't feel as alone, because that's another subject that maybe go on for a different podcast, but how sometimes we can feel alone.
Yep. That's actually on our list of episodes already. So what we're going to do is we're going to wrap it up right there. So thanks, guys. Just remember, life doesn't end because your child is disabled. If you are struggling to raise your disabled child into struggling with the rest of your life, we're here to help. Okay, and check us out at edlpodcast.com.